Not created from a rib, but absolutely first in the human life order. The beautiful female is the progenitor and prototype of all life. In all forms of life, she must be established first for life to exist and continue. Creation and existence are based on a foundation of reproduction. A life form could not and would not form without establishing within itself a system to ensure continual existence through reproduction. The female's position as first and primal in the order of all life is only preceded by God, the mother of all life and creation. The male is secondary in the order of life. Along with a mutually pleasurable system of reproduction for most species of life, the male also serves as a valiant protector for the female. Observation of voracious factors made quite conspicuous this beautiful and perfect order of life. Let us first place under scrutiny the chromosome factor. The female's chromosomes are represented by two X's. The male's represented by an X and a Y. How can this be interpreted to establish the true dominance and position of the female? Let me simplify it. If X and Y have preceded the two X's, as some historical documentation suggests, there would have to be evidence of the Y chromosome within the two X's. The Y is clearly absent in her two X's. This clearly identifies her two X's as the progenitor of the X and the Y, because the derivative always carries within itself the qualities of that which it is derived from. X and Y has evidence of XX within itself, with the additional right of its own new identity, the Y. Similar to when a child is born, the newborn has its own new identity of DNA along with its progenitor's DNA. For example, if the parents of a child's DNA are 19 as a numerical representation for the mother and 17 as a numerical representation for the father, the child's DNA would equate to 19, 17, 36. A correlation of the mother's 19 and the father's 17 with the child's own new identity. If XY had in fact preceded XX, you would surely find evidence of the male Y chromosome in the female's XX chromosomes. A rule of nature, that which is derived from the prototype can always be traced back to the prototype. Because the female's XX chromosomes preceded and created the male's X and Y chromosomes, we will always find the female's X chromosome within her offspring. We also possess the Y chromosome, being the evidence of a new identity and progeny of the beautiful female. The chromosomes of the female give indisputable and indissoluble evidence that establish her as the prototype and progenitor of the human race. The birth factor is appropriately summoned for testimony next in the order of this evidentiary. Every species known to humankind must go through the birth canal of the female in order to achieve life. Yes, this means that every human being must spend their first several weeks in life inside of the female. This is a basic rule of life for all beings on Earth. There are some exceptions, like the male seahorse that gives birth to its young. But even this species of seahorse must first receive the egg of reproduction from the female seahorse. The male seahorse is only responsible for the gestation period, not the reproduction of life. The connection between mother and child is irreversible, and there is an invisible and impregnable bond that every living being has to the female. The preponderance of the mother's position in the survival of all species of life will always and naturally outweigh that of the father's. Immaculate conception, parthenogenesis are both possibilities in favor of the female's ability to keep life continuous without the presence of a male. This certainly establishes what gender had to be created first. The chicken must come first to ensure the safe reproduction of the egg or eggs. The egg or seed is the very symbol of reproduction of that which it is derived from. An orange does not pop up from the ground, and an apple will not fall from the sky. The tree must be established first and then give birth to its fruit. The entity that produces the egg of reproduction has no other option but to be the progenitor and the origin of the species she gives birth to. If there currently exist living organisms in which the female produces offspring without the help of the male, like certain plant life or microscopic organisms, then the question of which gender is the more expendable is quite apparently expressed when the inquisition for the answer is thoroughly scrutinized. Before we journey into the discrimination factor, let us first explore the rules of the held to a higher standard factor. In Total Rhetoric, I pose this question: why is it that if a male conducts a sexually promiscuous lifestyle, he is looked at as typical? But if a female displays the same sexually promiscuous lifestyle, she is looked at as below humane or submarginal? Why do males expect a standard of life for the female to uphold higher than the standard of life he sets for himself? The only time a human being expects another human being to uphold a standard higher than the one they themselves are upholding is when that human feels that the other human is above them. For example, the younger sibling looks to the older sibling for guidance and holds the older sibling to a higher standard than they hold themselves at. As males, for some subconscious reason, we expect the female to be perfect. We hold her to a much higher standard. The male never condescends the female naturally or by instinct. This behavior must be learned, and is a defense mechanism. Many historical books written by males, including the Bible and the Quran, imply that the female is inferior to the male. Instinctively, the male does not mentally function this way. He automatically respects the female and holds her in extremely high regard. After all, she is the producer of life. Ipso facto, the only reason the female is ever held to a higher standard by the male is because the male recognizes subconsciously, and in many cases consciously, the female's position as progenitor of the human race, the indelible mother-to-child bond. This subconscious cognizance of the female's position forces the male to hold the female to a higher standard. One fact is for certain: the female has a supreme, dominant, and imperative position in the human life order. With the most keen understanding and respect for her position as first, this author is most satisfied, proud, and passionately ebullient with his position as secondary in the human life order, endowed with the task of protecting, completely satisfying, and assisting the beautiful human female with the incessant creation of our Guinness. The discrimination factor is based on some of the subconscious and even cognizant actions that a large majority of males perform with an absence of respect and consideration for the female. In human behavior, anytime one human being discriminates against another group of human beings, it is usually because the party that is acting discriminatory is jealous of the party that is being discriminated against. When human beings feel pity or experience the pathos emotion for someone or something, unfair treatment or punitive measures are usually never a mental reaction. However, when humans fear something, an automatic defense mechanism is established within the human's mentality. This defense mechanism is established to hamper emotions of guilt and may manifest itself in a number of different ways. One of the most common ways is discriminatory treatment against the feared party. In the human mentality, when we treat someone unjust or unfairly, it is a mental compensation for the advantage that a person may have over us. The male's past and still present treatment of the female once again prove her to be the progenitor of the two, for the mother could never be so cruel to her offspring. Not allowing the female to vote, be in positions of authority, or even express her true feelings are all measures of control. When a human seeks to control something, fear is always a factor, whether it be control of a child by the parent due to a factor of fear of that child becoming a failure in life, or fear of a slave by their master. They give them the adequate tools, the slave might supplant their master's position. Control is always based on fear. The many discriminatory measures carried out by males over the past several centuries were all fear-based. At what point in history did respect for the very producer of life take a nosedive, and why? Even in the Bible's Old Testament, there is documentation of males worshiping female deities and holding a high standard of respect for the female. When did the male forget and abolish the basic and natural law of loving, respecting, and cherishing the beautiful entity that carried him for 9 months and endowed him with the very gift of life? At some point in history, male chauvinism became so excessive that the beautiful existence of our maker, the female, began to be viewed as expendable and secondary in the eyes of the male. Men became non-existent and males began their reign. The psychology of the identity factor I'll explore briefly. The female's identity can never be compromised. The male must be taught to be a man. The female will become a woman regardless. The objective of the identity factor is to once more make apparent who is the true progenitor of the human race. The prototype's identity can never be compromised because the prototype sets the definition of its offspring. The prototype was created to be exactly what it is, and nothing can change that. To say, claim, or propagate that the very gender that gives birth to the offspring of the rest of its race is second in the order of its species is absurd. The gender that gives birth has to be the prototype, progenitor, and beginning of its offspring, because without the birth cycle, nothing can exist. In every species of life, the female produces the egg or seed of life, and her beautiful identity and position is primal. Even as it appears that the queen has been ousted from most forms of human and social government, it is still quite obvious who pulls the strings to the puppet. The male will always be in search of the female's approval and satisfaction. Everything we do as males is attributed to a lifetime goal of obtaining and satisfying the woman or women that we will one day call our wife or wives. Our mothers are always at the top of our list when it comes to people we would die for, and a man will always maintain the constant endeavor to keep his female partner happy. It is in our nature to do so. Her order is witness to the way our entire society accepts the trends and fads each intricate culture of our world displays. In today's modern society, her word is final on what is termed cool and what is not. Her control is established through the incessant competition of males trying to gain her attention and affection. These facts of human interaction are executed so surreptitiously that its executors, the female, and its willing participants, the male, so consciously keep this order intact. This seems to be the way of life that the Creator intended for the creatures of the earth. The male is always proud to satisfy the female. It is an accretion to our mental mind state and self-esteem. Without her presence, there is no happiness for the male. I call this the invisible control factor. If females were to mysteriously disappear from the face of the earth, not only would males follow, but would be following total chaos. Without her presence, currency is virtually meaningless. There would be nothing for us to work for, or no hope with the exception of building a space vessel complex enough to find another Earth-like providence that may harbor females. The maturity factor, in brief, discloses the conspicuous facts of the female reaching a level of maturity before the male. Obviously, the creator must mature before the co-creator. It also explains why, generally, the female has the male's behavior predicted and mastered from an early age, which is why we are usually the ones that pursue and court her, while she patiently waits for he who is compatible. Preceding the final factor of this treatise, we must examine the majority factor. What is the significance of the female population outnumbering the male population? Nature does protect itself by instinctively taking measures to ensure its survival. One of these measures is the surety of the abundance of the main ingredient or main factor of its existence. In the continuing survival and growth of the human race, the female is the obvious main ingredient and factor. The human gene, as small as it is, has the instinctive mission of ensuring its salutary existence. This is the gene's primal function: constant, industrious improvement and survival. The longer the human continues to exist, the better the species becomes. This relates to the majority factor in proving that even genes have instinctive survival function. This complex instinctive survival function ensures in an assortment of known and unknown ways that the female is the majority. Everything that we do as males in life, such as building, combat, and protecting the female, contrary to the female's prime tasks, such as childbirth and mentally keeping the nation and family intact, are all contributors to this factor, and much less risky in relation to life and death. The scientific factor arduously challenges and attacks the modern-day customs and operations of today's society. This factor expresses the order that the creator of the universe established not only for humans, but for every other life form known to humankind. This factor proves and places the female at the apex and beginning of the human life order, just as the preceding factors do. In order to obtain living, breathing life on this planet, you must go through the prototype of your Guinness. In all species of life, this prototype is in fact the female. No fairy tales, no acrimonious lies, just science. Science is how God explains to humans their origin, existence, and futures. Humans have tried to separate the creator from science out of ignorance, but science is our history, present, and future. All the veritable answers we as humans need are in front of our eyes and within the capabilities of our minds to grasp. With spiritual understanding and a profound commitment to righteousness, a higher sense of knowledge will begin to form within us. We will begin to clearly see and comprehend the obvious ideals, promises, and significations that our Creator has provided for us. Without spiritual righteousness, it is impossible to discern the higher knowledge that God wants us to obtain. However, it does seem that the Creator allows humans their own choice in the matter. Everything that exists in circular form, from the circular spiral of the Milky Way and all the other galaxies to the billions of circular stars, planets, and moons contained within these galaxies. Even the invisible atom, that is the makeup of all mass and matter of the universe, is circular. No wonder what goes around comes around. Whatever is sent out from a source, be it negative or positive, has no other option in its destination but to return to its point of origin. A law of existence the Creator enacted from the very beginning, if there ever was a beginning. Who is the female? She is the beginning of all that exists, not secondary in the order of life, and definitely not established from her offspring's rib. And if our Creator has a gender, and it is the image of the first being, one only has to examine the earth we inhabit to comprehend that she had no beginning other than when the mother created her, and he is only established through the birth cycle of she. God has made the female's position of dominance quite conspicuous for all to see. The artificial and quite speciously fallacious story that males of substandard masculinity had made up about a male being created first and the female being created from her offspring's rib can easily be discredited by reviewing the meaningful signatures that God has provided us within science, history, and mathematics. In many species of life, the male is considered to be extremely expendable, with death occurring for the male species subsequently and immediately after impregnation of the female. Fortunately for the human males, we are allowed to enjoy ecstatic interactions with the human female. From the superficial appearance, the statement "a man's world" seems to be factual. However, anyone with understanding can see through this false statement and exterior and realize that internally, and if you look with prudent discernment, that this planet is controlled by the one who produces its offspring, the one whose control is established through the male's incessant endeavor to keep her happy. It is clear to those with knowledge that she pulls the strings to her puppet. This disposition isn't based nor aimed at discrediting the important position of my fellow male in the human life order. It is only to reestablish and make transparent the important and essentially necessary position of the beautiful female. This treatise is documented in part to enlighten my fellow male on how to be a man and how absolutely blessed and fortunate we are to be the protector of the beautiful human female, with the benefit of enjoying and satisfying her very presence. Believe P. Kelson.